right, welcome back to the Common Sense Medicine podcast with your host, Dr. Timothy Chin. I'm your co-host, Michael Abernathy. And today we might have a little bit of a shorter episode for you. This was kind of an unplanned one, but after last episode, I just kind of had some thoughts and said, well, I need to answer some questions that I personally had coming out of that episode that maybe other people might have as well. But catch us up from last week.
Yeah.
Well, I say last week, but it's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah. I was looking at the last time I recorded and I was like, man, it has quite, been a long time. But the skinny of it is, first of all, I think everybody should go back and listen to the last episode. It is a little long, but there's so much note taking that you really need to do because, again, we're getting to the nitty gritty part of execution now. Yeah. Right. So we went over the science, we went over the calories, and that's, I think, where most people focus on. Even things on social media, all I watch is like people calorie counting and this and that. But the real rubber hitting the road part is this mindset. It's the 5%ers. It's the things that people do consistently that help them get the results that they want. And there are so many techniques and so many things on the positive side, I think, which is what we were focused on a lot on last time, of like, was it positive disintegration and a lot of fancy terms. But the big thing is there are a lot of ones in that episode that essentially are giving you tools to help you get the consistency back on track. But I think today what we realize also about our human nature is we do a lot of self-sabotaging. Yeah, well, yes, and there are a lot of reasons for that we won't really even get into all of that today either. But coming out of last episode, we talked about having a positive mindset and the power that can have over your ability to change. And we spent a while talking about that. And after the fact, I was just on my drive home and I was just thinking about it. And I said, why do we have to force ourselves to be positive? Like, why is it so difficult to just be positive? You know what I mean? Like, it's easy to say, oh, just be positive, or I'm going to have a great day today. Why is that such a hard thing for us to do? Yeah. And so that's the question that I'm going to try to answer today is why is that not the default state? And if that's not the default state, if we have to force ourselves to be positive, then what does that mean about the default state? Like, and the fact is that it's negativity. That's the default state. Yeah. And there are reasons for that, which we'll talk about today. So today, Michael, let's talk about, let's start off on it. There is this term called negativity bias, which is essentially what we're talking about. What exactly is that? So it's one of just a multitude of different cognitive biases, which are, a bias is means that you have a preference for one thing over another, right? And so a negativity bias doesn't necessarily mean that you consciously prefer negative things over positive things. It's just that your brain tends to put more emphasis or more weight on negative events or experiences than it does on positive experiences. And so this is why we tend to remember negative events more easily and more vividly than we do positive events. And it's also why, like, this is one that I've had before where it's like, probably 10 years ago, you say something stupid and then you felt really embarrassed about it. And then for one reason or another, 10 years later, you're sitting in your bed and you think about that moment and you just still feel so embarrassed about it because it's so vivid in your mind. It's like, why did I say that? Why, nobody remembers that but you, but it's because it wasn't a negative experience for them. Like, they don't care, but you will sit there and just dwell on that. And I don't know why, but, and another one is why it's like, you ever had an annual review at work and you've done stellar all year and they have one little piece of constructive criticism for you that kind of catches you off guard, but you will let that one little piece, you could have 99 positive things where you've exceeded expectations and have one little thing that just ruins your whole day or whole week, and you'll just sit there and dwell on it and you just won't get any work done that day because you're focused so much on the negative. So that's kind of the gist of negativity bias. It's
just we focus on negatives way more than positives.
Yeah, and in the sense of weight loss, which is what this whole series is about, this is often what hinders people's progress.
Yeah.
Right, because they might be, and we'll hear it. We'll have patients that have done very well. They've started making really good changes. They've lost weight. They've done all these things great. They even feel great. And you ask them, well, how are things going? They're like, well, I only walk half a mile a day. And you're like, but that's more than you've done before. But it's interesting how the brain, instead of being very, congratulatory of how you're doing, the brain is automatically like, well, I didn't really do very much.
Right. And I think I'm reading a book right now called Worthy, and it's super good. It's exploring the concept of self-worth versus like self-confidence would be your belief in your abilities to do things like externally, right? Well, self-worth is not affected by external things. It's like your intrinsic value and how you view yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that a lot of that kind of not giving enough credit to the positive things you do kind of ties in with that a little bit. But that's a really deep topic to talk about another time, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that same thing where you go like, well, I did really well. I lost, 2 pounds this week, but I could have done more if I hadn't blown it on the weekend. But it's like, you still lost 2 pounds last week. Do you know how like that's a big deal? Or, I was trying to lose 10 pounds this month, but I only lost 8. I'm like, seriously?
Yeah.
Like, you're going to beat yourself up over the 2 that you didn't lose rather than celebrate the 8 that you did.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something where we downplay our successes and then kind of replace them, or we put this negative spin on it and then use that to I guess, describe our efforts.
Yeah.
Right. So we're just looking at it in a negative light rather than a positive.
Well, and is there any reason that we do that? Is that why it's hardwired into our being?
Yeah, it's one of those things that's left over from early development of the human experience. Back when survival was not guaranteed and everything in the world was trying to kill you all the time. It's kind of like Australia. Yes. We needed to quickly develop a memory of things that could potentially harm us. And so, if you got bit by that snake over there, you remember, well, I don't want to get anywhere near that next time, or, but it's just a way of our brain is trying to protect ourselves from harmful things. Right. And so it's like really beneficial only nowadays in like the early stages, maybe when you're a baby or a toddler, because you don't have a lot of world experience or life experience or context for things. Because that's one of the things that negativity bias helps with from a survival standpoint, is helping us to avoid harms or potential harms when we don't have a lot of context. So, fire is hot here, or you saw a snake in the water or a crocodile in the water over here, but this body of water is different. But because you associate, negative experiences with this water that you can't see the bottom of, now you have that for all bodies of water, because that context kind of helps keep you safe from anything that might be in there, even if there's nothing there. Right. And so it's just a way of kind of keeping you safe from things that you just aren't really sure about. But it doesn't really help us a lot now. And like we talked about last time, or we've kind of talked about this in the context of the brain's protection against weight gain and weight loss, not really helping us in this day and age. The brain doesn't just shut down parts of the brain that it doesn't really benefit from too much anymore. It just kind of repurposes it. And so just in the way that your brain will, perceive threats where they don't exist and start just making stuff up for you to worry about all the time. It's kind of a similar thing where we aren't really worried about survival. So we just start paying attention to negatives because that's what your brain is programmed to do, is like look for the negatives.
I gotcha. Well, and I guess this always makes sense because if you are trying to do something for, let's say, an exercise, you're starting a new exercise regimen, but you always have a negativity bias toward that exercise regimen, then it doesn't take much to throw you off that practice. Like any little hiccup, even no matter how much benefit you have, any little hiccup you're going to perceive as negative, and instantly people will stop progressing, which can be a big problem because then we're constantly starting things and stopping things over and over and over. And I don't know, in a sense, right, like you said, we didn't get rid of that need, but now it's becoming almost self-destructive and starting to cause problems with progress that we need to get done.
Yeah, and so there's another bias that kind of can make or break here that kind of ties in with it, called confirmation bias. And what confirmation bias is that you tend to look for things that confirm your current belief on something. So if you go around thinking that life is terrible, you're going to pay attention and keep an eye out for things that confirm that bias, right? And so you're going to focus on all the things in your life that are terrible. If you think that your life is good, your brain is going to keep an eye out for things and find reasons to reinforce that belief. And because we have a negativity bias, the confirmation bias will look out for things that are negative to confirm that for us. And so it kind of takes a little bit of knowing, but a little bit of practicing. And so one of the things that we can do to kind of practice that is just kind of recognize when we're doing it, and then start celebrating little wins where we can. Start looking for wins more frequently, even if it's something stupid, like something really small. And we talked about this last time, celebrating small wins. But this is, it's celebrating small wins may seem, dumb sometimes, but the purpose is to get the practice in of doing it. And when you start celebrating them more frequently, you start seeing them more frequently because your confirmation bias will pick that up and start looking for them. So when you get better at celebrating them, you get better at seeing them. When you get better at seeing them, it really starts to change your perspective of how you're doing and can really make or break make the difference in your progress or your failure,
Yeah. Well, again, that makes a whole lot of sense because, again, we're trying to help people develop a habit and keep a habit. And again, if a habit feels good, you're going to keep doing it. If a habit feels bad, you're going to stop doing it really, really quickly. And like you said, if you can start finding the small wins in the habit, that will help the brain increase the dopamine, feel like this is a rewarding habit that I like doing, which will then reinforce your need to keep going with it. I always thought it was really interesting because, like, for some people, like to go for a walk, it's a chore for them. Like, it's another thing that I do on the list. But for me, it's like I can't wait to be outside because I love being outside. So it's the same activity, right? We're both outside. We're both put feet in front of the other, being outside. But one mindset could be, this is the worst thing. This is another thing. I'm too busy. I have no time to do it. And I spent 20 minutes negatively biasing me to not go out there. The other side is like, let me get out there because I love being in the sun. I want to be outside. I like how it feels. I feel better. This is kind of like the need for you to look for what you enjoy in the things that you're doing, the wins, and that's what helps you actually stay on task. And
that's why we put so much emphasis on making that easy by, starting small and prioritizing things that you enjoy that you are more likely to stick to. It just makes it so much easier to stay, to see those positives when you aren't constantly fighting against yourself to do these things.
Yeah.
And on the other side of, looking at your outcomes and, looking for the positives within them, we mentioned this before, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on it. It's reframing losses. And so last episode, we talked about using losses as a learning experience. And so that's, since we're going to be focusing on those, losses or failures anyway, we might as well spend more time thinking about them and how we can reframe them. And so I have an example that I just kind of worked through on my own, just to give you an idea of how this works. Is let's say that you were doing really well on your diet and then you ate fast food. So you perceive that as a failure. And so normally what we do is we'd say, oh, well, I failed. I might as well just, throw it out the window and start next week or whatever, and just give up right now. But instead, why don't we just go, okay, so why did we eat fast food? Okay, so we failed. Why did we fail? What happened? Because you were running late from work and you didn't have time to cook a healthy meal. And so you just stopped and got something fast. Okay. So we've accepted that we made a mistake or whatever. We understand why, because it was a lack of time or energy. So what could we have done differently, to make a different choice, right? Is there a different restaurant you could have gone to that had healthier options? Were there healthier options that you could have, picked there that wouldn't have been so guilt-inducing, right? Could you have, had something at home that was faster, or a recipe that's really easy that you could have done that would have taken no time at all? And normally you can answer yes to a lot of these questions, right? You could have ordered a salad or something instead of a burger. Not to call you out.
That was me. I was going to be 100% today.
Like instead of fries, if they had a fruit cup, you could have done that. And it's not like it doesn't make it 100% healthy, but we're not looking for 100%,
right.
And we're not going to be perfect. So we just make a little bit, a little bit better. You could have done some meal prepping or something and had something ready to go. You just throw it in the microwave, or even had like a, what do they call it? Lean cuisines? It's just a healthier frozen dinner that takes like no time at all. I mean, those are probably not the greatest thing in the world, but if it's better than the burger and the fries and the large Coke, and I mean, that's a step in the right direction. So you kind of have to break it down and say, okay, this is why I feel like I failed. This is what led to that. What could I do differently next time to make a different choice or handle that situation differently? And then you've gained more knowledge about what works, and then you can implement that next time. And so next time when you're running late from work and you don't have time to cook dinner, you have 3 different ways that you could have done better and come out healthier and not felt like such a failure there. So you're just improving your process by just kind of thinking through it, breaking it down, and kind of exploring the failure rather than just admitting it and then giving up. Yeah.
Well, see, I think this is why coaching is so helpful, because sometimes you just need an objective third-party person to just help you look at it in that direction, right? Because sometimes, right, you're busy already. That's probably why you didn't get to eat what you want to. And again, you're so busy, you didn't even get a chance to just reevaluate, even though it doesn't take long to kind of reevaluate. But sometimes having a coach can help you like, oh, okay, well, let's reframe that a little bit.
Yeah, because it's hard for us to kind of take that, bird's eye view of our lives, of our situations. When you're talking to somebody that is, listening, it's easy for them to look at it from a bird's eye view because they're not living in that moment, right? So they can look at it objectively and kind of help look for those alternatives. And as a coach, that's kind of something I do a lot, is just kind of listen. And, I try to avoid or resist just throwing out the recommendation straight away. What I should do, and I'm not always great at it, is, asking open-ended questions and getting you to kind of explore that with me, instead of just giving you the answer, because that tends to be less effective than having you kind of think about it in terms of your life and come up with answers on your own. But a lot of times, I hear the same things over and over and over. So I kind of have this catalog in my head of like, oh, well, this has worked for X amount of people and this has worked for me, so it might work for you. But offering that advice before it's asked for can actually cause more harm than good. So I try to resist that as much as possible. But that's something that we all need to work on.
Yeah, no, and again, I think this is super helpful because now what we're telling you is we know we have a negativity bias. We know now that our brain is usually looking for the problem versus celebrating the wins. And again, back in the day, that kept us alive, right? Alligator in the water, let's try to avoid water because it might kill us. Even though we had a great time swimming last time, this time it might kill us. But again, we don't have that problem anymore. So now we need to be able to reframe our brain, looking for wins, looking for like celebrating the things that you've done well. If you've made a mistake, being able to step back and actually look for solutions versus just, well, let's just start January 1, which is, unfortunately, I mean, there's big media markets in starting, I mean, in the gyms and supplements. I mean, I'm already seeing the ads now. January 1, it's time to start again. But we start seeing this cycle every single year, and we realize everybody's going through the same thing because we're all kind of wired that same way. But if you get a chance to just kind of step back and look at it, you can actually find maybe more opportunity for you to be able to sustain your habit by looking for the wins and reframing your losses.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about a couple of other biases real quick, but I wanted to make two things that I thought about while you were just talking. And one, when you were like, I'm not going to go swimming because there might be a crocodile in there. I was just reading Proverbs the other day, and there's one about people that won't leave their house because there might be a lion out there. And I just, for whatever reason, that cracked me up in my head because I was like, man, there might be a lion out there. I don't want to go outside. Yeah. But that's the same. Like, we've been dealing with this for apparently thousands of years, you know, the same kind of concept, you know. But the other one is, you know, it explains why the news media is always so negative because they base their content on the ratings they get. Right. And we're looking for negative so much that when they put negative things on there, we're going to tune in. Sure. And we're not going to look. It's like the train wreck you can't look away from, right? And so they capitalize on our biases just the same way grocery stores capitalize on our, you know, our willpower by putting all the junk at the register. Correct. News puts all the negative stuff right there, and you just can't look away because it's a disaster. Yeah. And, you know, because that drives their ratings, they just continue to put that garbage up there. Absolutely. It's just all negative all the time. Yeah. And speaking of that, oftentimes because you see it, the view is like tenfold worse than it actually is. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, the pandemic was prime example of, you know, people are looking at death rates per age group, and you ask the public after watching the news, and they're usually about 1,000-fold off, which is just like, okay, and so for you to make a decision based on 1,000-fold off, you make very different decisions. And so same with like weight loss, nutrition, like people are like, well, to go to the gym, I have to do, like I had one patient one time, he says, I don't have 3 hours a day to go to the gym. And I'm like, who's going to the gym 3 hours a day? But the negativity bias has gotten so strong that even if like all you need is 20, 30 minutes, even broken up throughout the day. You don't even need that. Yeah. Like, so the coaches at the gym at work are doing a thing where every hour they do like 5 pull-ups or 10 pull-ups. And we talked about this before, where it's, you know, the benefits of just standing up at your desk and doing 10 body weight squats or something every hour. Yeah. And they're doing the same concept. So even if they don't get a full workout in, they're just going over and knocking out 5 to 10 pull-ups every hour. And at the end of the day, that's a lot of pull-ups. That's a lot of pull-ups. Yeah. You know, if you can do 5, I mean, that's a big deal by itself. Yep. But if you can do 5 and then you can do that every hour, you know, for 8 hours, you're getting close to 50 pull-ups in a day. That's a good. That's significant. Yeah. And again, the amount of work you need to do that is so small, but our negativity bias is so big that we're in the brain like, well, if I can't do 3 hours, I might not do anything. Right. What is happening here? So you're exactly right. It's interesting that, again, we're seeing this play out in society, but even in our own health journey, it's constantly playing out. Yeah. So, and I'm pretty sure that there's a cognitive bias for that, where it's, you know, the one where you're like, the numbers are like 1,000-fold off. I'm sure that there's a name for that, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but I did remember reading about it recently. But so we talked about confirmation bias, and so something to remember about confirmation bias is that you see what you look for and you hit what you aim for. And so you want to be looking for those good things, because then you will start seeing them more. Recency bias is another one. And that's where we give greater importance to things that happen more recently. And so even if we have had 90 good things and then the most recent thing that happened was negative, we're going to let that kind of affect how we feel about the entire process, even if it's been, you know, really good up until that point, you know. And so that ties in with the negativity bias, but it's that recency thing. So if you have, you know, a struggle, you're going to associate the whole thing with that struggle because it's the most recent experience. And so this is also from a non-negative, or I guess neutral point. My school bus number when I was in like kindergarten and first grade was 192. I see 192 everywhere. Everywhere. You know what other number I see all the time? 222. Because it was in a rap song like 15 years ago and talking about room 222 or something. I see 222 everywhere because I'm looking for it.
Yeah.
If you learn something new or you have new information that comes in, like if you buy a new pair of shoes that you've never seen before, you like, these shoes are awesome.
Yep.
And I've never seen anybody else wear them. And then as soon as you walk home, walk out of the store, you see 36 dozen other people wearing the exact same shoes.
Yep.
Because you're looking for them now.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's something like we tend to look for things that are new to us and see that everywhere.
Yeah. And that's actually really interesting because I see that in social media health all the time. People are like, did you know that eating XYZ is so bad for you? And we're like, yes, we've known this forever. And they're like, but it's different. It's not any different, but they just kind of recycle the same things over and over.
So I was reading yesterday, it might've been the day before, but, there was a study that came out, or I guess it's a study that was looking at a whole bunch of people's diet, and it was from these people that had this app that was for nutrition tracking, and they developed a way to eat or diet based on calorie safety or something like that, and they have a scale from 0 to 100. And I don't remember exactly how they rate these things, but basically they look at the composition of the food, and then they give it a safety rating as far as calories. And so if you are consuming a lower safety rating, you're going to lose more weight. If your calorie safety rating or whatever they call that is higher, you're not going to lose as much weight or you're going to gain weight.
Yeah.
And so then I looked at how they formulate their ratings, and it is exactly what we laid out in part 1.
Yeah. It sounds like Weight Watchers.
High protein foods, high fiber foods, low processed foods, like all of those things that we laid out in part 1 is exactly what they were doing. They were just giving it a new name and then assigning it a number.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, well, at least this is another study that backs up exactly the stuff that we've already talked about.
Yeah.
So, I was curious because I'm like, oh, what is this new thing? And it's the same as the old thing. It's just a new name.
See, did y'all just watch our podcast and you would have learned it already? Look at calorie
didn't need to look at 11,000 or 47,000, dieters over 11 years or something like that. It's just there. And then let me see. I had one. Oh no, I have two more biases. One of them is imposter syndrome.
That one's very, very familiar.
Yes. Yeah, me too. Imposter syndrome is I'm just going to read it. A psychological occurrence in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. And so people that are high achievers, but maybe don't have a lot of that self-worth or self-confidence that we talked about before, suffer from imposter syndrome all the time. And so I'll give you a personal example of imposter syndrome. And this was weeks and weeks ago. Somebody left a comment on one of the YouTube videos and said, great. I think it was, and this is how you focus on, this is another example of negativity bias, because I remember it, but it was great. Another guy who says absolutely nothing. And this was like the summary of all of the scientific stuff. And I'm like, what episode did you just watch, dude? And I'm trying to like figure out why, what does he mean? Why does he say that there was a lot of good information in that episode. But the point is, like, I was so focused on that, trying to figure out why. And like, then I just said, you know what? I'm just going to sit here and feel these feelings. I'm just going to sit here and dwell on that and explore it. And it was basically lack of confidence in the stuff that we were doing. Like I was fearful that somebody was going to, I guess, view what we're doing as fraudulent or something, because it's kind of hard to put yourself out there, even when you know that the science is right and that you're, putting factual information out there. It's hard to put yourself out there sometimes. And that's kind of where that comes from. So I went through it one evening over that. And then I just sat there and I let myself kind of process that and realized why I was feeling that way. And then I was done with it. I just moved on.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously I remember it, but I remember it now because of how I handled it and how I didn't let it like prevent me from getting back in here and doing the next episode.
Absolutely.
Because I could have.
But
it's really easy to do that, man.
Very easy.
Like other people say, and he didn't even see anything like bad. He just said I didn't say anything. But I'm like, no, I said a lot in that episode. Like he must not even watched it. I'm like, it's probably a bot.
Probably a bot or a troll. Yeah.
So,
no.
But it's really easy to just let that stuff just get you down.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is also one of the ones, I think we talked on the exercise episode, is like, well, I've seen this a lot where people go to the gym, they get intimidated because they're not quite sure what they're doing. They might start something, they're making good progress, and then they get intimidated by something, and then they quit. There's no, what's that saying? You don't have to let good get in the way of perfect get in the way of good, right? Like that part of the imposter syndrome is you're trying to be this kind of perfection thing. And again, we're not looking for that. And you don't need that. You don't have to be perfect to get to the goal that you want to be at, unless you want to get 100 on a test, but other than that, I mean, you don't have to have that level. And it's hard, again, to get to that brain that we don't have to be perfect to get what we're looking for.
Right.
So.
Yeah. When I first became a dietitian and I was working in the hospital, it was like a year and a half before I felt like I wasn't going to get fired for not knowing what I was doing. Because every day I walk in, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, I did, obviously. Right. But at the same time, it's like, it takes a while to build that confidence up. And if you're in uncharted territory and you let that lack of confidence just keep you down, you're going to have a bad time.
Absolutely.
And that's, like I said, that's just human nature. Like we're all going to experience that, but it's like knowing what you know and letting yourself fall back to the education and the experience and the, even when you feel like you're, I guess less than, you're fine. Stop worrying about it.
Yeah.
And that's, like I said, that's way easier to say than it is to put into practice. My favorite fallacy or bias, and this is the last one.
Okay.
Is the G.I. Joe fallacy.
I've never heard that G.I. Joe.
I hadn't either, and I read about it. I'm like, this is great. And so do you remember the G.I. Joe cartoon? We're definitely dating ourselves here.
Oh,
but,
yeah, absolutely.
you know how they used to have the little PSAs, the public service announcements, where they'd be like, and knowing is half the battle or something like that. The G.I. Joe fallacy is the tendency to think that knowing about cognitive biases will be enough to overcome them.
Yep.
Because we can tell you about these, you can understand why they exist, and that you can recognize when they're at play. But just knowing about it is not enough to just not make it happen. Like you're still going to experience them. You have to actively work on countering them. And even if you are really good at countering them, eventually you will fall back into them. It's just the way the brain works. So it's a work in progress and it never stops. So
well, and I think that is a good one to kind of wrap things up, because what we're saying, all these things that we're saying, they're good academically, but you have to put some work in to work with them. It's just kind of like, if I ever told my wife, stop being anxious, all husbands know you're about to get popped. It's just not, it doesn't work like that. There needs to be some kind of work. And even to yourself, like when people have phobias, you can't just tell yourself, stop worrying. It doesn't work like that. There's work, there's exposure therapy. There's a lot of things that you have to do to overcome something. And so, these matters of it's just, now I know why I don't go to the gym. It's just because I have negativity bias. Okay, it's good to know. You still have to work through those things to actually get out of that spot. Yeah,
I think the gist, the way that I would summarize this episode and a lot of last episode is to everything that we're talking about and you experience them, that is normal. I'm not saying that we're normalizing it as far as, it's okay. No, it is because it's just the way that the body and the brain works. These are things everybody goes through. If you have these kinds of feelings or struggles, everybody does.
Right.
So that's kind of the thing is we're trying to give you a name to put to these problems that people have all the time.
Right.
Because once you name something and kind of understand it, then you can kind of start working on putting those things into place to fight them and, you know, counter them. But when you aren't really sure why things are the way they are, it's really hard to kind of maneuver around that. So when you know, you know.
You know. There you go. All right. Well, that's a good wrap up, Michael. We are moving on. We're getting close, I guess. We have a couple more before the series is done, and then we will.
Well, I thought about it too, because part 2 is in a lot of ways, these few episodes talking about mindset, motivation, all that can be generalized to just behavioral change. And a lot of part 2 can be generalized to behavioral change. And part 1 was like very specific to the dietary science and stuff. But yeah, a lot of this stuff is not exclusive to weight loss, but it's important in weight loss because weight loss is that behavioral change. Like a lot of it is behavioral change. So, but I wanted to give a book recommendation.
Yes.
Because we talked a lot about cognitive biases today. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel, I can never pronounce this last name right. It's Kahneman or Kahneman.
I've heard that book before.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a pretty hefty one.
Okay.
As far as he doesn't tell stories or give like lighthearted thing. It is a pretty academic like breakdown of why your brain works the way it does, and you know it was a tough read, but it goes into really good detail in explaining a lot of these biases and stuff like that. So,
awesome.
But it wasn't bad.
Okay. Well, awesome. Well, we're excited. We have more coming next week. And then, I guess it's Christmas next week. So we skipped that one. And then we'll have another one. I guess New Year's is right after. So it's just going to be flowing and going.
It's that time of year, man. Yeah. It's wild. So we'll have an episode. We'll record that. I guess we'll just pull back the curtain here and
that's right.
Show them the Wizard of Oz.
That's right. We'll get it all done and get it ready for you guys.
Yeah, we'll record again tomorrow, and then I will try to finish an episode so we can record Friday, and then we'll have like 3 weeks to go.
Sounds good.
So,
okay.
All right.
Thanks, Michael.